This is Tziporah and I'm coming to you from Yerushalayim. Today's class is going to be different than the other classes we've been doing because of an event that took place that we have to address because it's God's providence that puts us in this time and in this place. The class is going to be a bit of a departure. Most of you have heard about the terrible, terrible crime that took place in Borough Park recently. A young child, Leiby Kletzky, was coming home from day camp. It was his first day walking home alone. His mother took him through a couple of dry runs. He's almost 9. When my kids are 9, they walk home alone. 3 blocks into the walk, his mother was waiting for him. She wasn't going to let him go the whole way himself. He wanted to be like the other guys, big, able. He never made it to her. Something happened. What we know now is that a man, Leiby, stopped. He saw the boy who looked confused. He offered him a ride. We don't know what Leiby thought, but how many 9-year-olds could resist going into a big car with somebody who looks like the guys we've seen before? Religious looking, keep on his head, big car. We don't know what happened next as of this minute. We know what the murderer says. The murderer says that the child asked him to go to a store. The store was closed. He took him to a wedding, the murderer claimed, which turned out to be not true, although the murderer himself did go to the wedding. But somehow the child ended up in the apartment. We don't know what happened in the apartment. It's hard to think about what happened in the apartment. But what we do know is this, that the murderer had scratches on his arm, that the child was resisting him. He claims that he suffocated him with a bath towel. May be true. He dismembered his body. He put most of his body in a red suitcase and dumped it in another area. He left his feet for himself in his freezer. When it was clear that the child was missing, the parents did everything one does. The school, the police, the local efforts that have to be made through the Shomrim, through the Hatzalah. And before much time passed, close to 3,000 people were out searching. They had a headquarters, the search was organized. They had a grid of the neighborhood. People were assigned very, very specific areas to search. People waited online to be part of the searchers, to be part of this effort. Somewhere along the line, the boy's teacher, who could imagine how distraught he was, told his father about what's going on. His father joined the searches, but in the middle of the night, he said, the kid's going to be found. What could be with a 9-year-old? He's asleep somewhere. When his son told him in the morning that he wasn't found, he resolved to find him. He figured the child had to walk from the day camp somewhere. He would know the basic direction. He pleaded with the people who had businesses on this street to show him the film on their surveillance cameras. Not all of them were so willing to do so. It meant closing the store for a few moments, and they didn't really believe it would pick anything up. But it did. The film showed the child walking in the street alone, talking to a man, and getting into the infamous Honda. And once the police had that, they were on the way to closing the case. So what does that say to us? It touched something. It was on the first page of the New York Times. Why did it touch people in this way? So there are 3 things that we have to talk about for ourselves. One concerns the murderer. One concerns Mr. Gurman. The third concerns the searchers. And above all, we have to see God's hand as he directed all of their lives. Let's talk about the murderer. It's easy to say he was sick. There is no sickness called evil. If you want to maintain that he's sick because he did an atrocity, and therefore he's blameless because he's sick, then every Nazi was sick. Genghis Khan was sick. He was fragmented, meaning the animal soul, the soul what had whatever dark passions, I don't know what they were, sadism, Was he a pedophile? The police have found no evidence of that. I don't know. But whatever was driving him was dark. But what I want you to know is that we all have dark places within the animal self, the part that's driven to immediate gratification of every desire and fears only one thing, punishment or pain. That part of us is universal. The difference between you and him is that you let your spiritual self, your higher self, prevail more of the time. He failed. But what you learn from him is important. People erroneously think that the enemy of their personal freedom is structure. They feel that the mitzvot are repressive. No, the mitzvot free you from the enslavement that you have to your desires, from the compulsions that take you to where you don't want to go. People confuse the no and the don't of the structure of mitzvot with cruelty, with lack of understanding. No, you're not saying no to love. You're saying no to taiva. You're saying no to lust. You're saying no to what you don't want to be. We have to know this, because that no is coming from a place of love. The second thing that we have to go back to is Mr. German, who said, I am going to not rest until we know something. How did he get people in the end to let him see their surveillance films? So from what I read, he had one weapon. It was the force of his emotion. He cried. He begged the person who actually turned out to be the person whose film picked up the child's trail. He cried. He said, it's a child. What does that tell you? What that tells you is that your commitment to doing what's right can't be intellectual. It can't be, oh, I believe this. It has to go down from your mind to your heart to your actions. We have to be real, and reality means being inclusive. There's a third thing. There were 3,000 searchers. Most of them went home feeling that what they did was futile to some degree. It wasn't futile. It was the collective consciousness of the Jews. It was the kind of consciousness that says, and we believe in something. We believe in the preciousness of a single life, of one child. We don't have to know the child. We don't have to necessarily empathize with his parents on a social level. We don't have to identify with them. The people who searched were not only Hasidic Jews from Borough Park. I saw the pictures of the crowds. Very mixed, very willing. So for them, when they review their lives after their deaths, when you see the film, it doesn't matter that they didn't find the child. It matters that they were part of something bigger than themselves. For them, this was, believe it or not, a highlight of their eternity. The night that they stayed up looking for a child they don't know. You have to find that place in yourself. You have to ask yourself, and where am I buying some eternity? Now, there's another part of this story. People will ask, and where was God here? He was there. I want you to realize this. The child got out of day camp at a certain hour. It's extremely unlikely. I mean, the statistical odds against this boggle the mind. Could Leiby Aaron have possibly known that this is going to be the day that the mother lets this child walk home alone? How could he have known that? Nobody knew that. And he was there at the right time in the right place. This isn't random. That the child felt confused enough to go to a stranger. This is a 9-year-old, an almost 9-year-old. It's also unusual. This was orchestrated by God, as was the search, as was the success in finding the surveillance film, as was the police ability to look at the film, find the car, go up to the receptionist in the dental office, and find the man through the information she could provide them with. All of this is providential. Now you could say, so what did he want? So I want to tell you something. There are probably going to be people with easy answers, and the easy answers are not going to be true. And the reason why I could say this with such complete sincerity is that we're living in a book with many, many pages. We're up to page 5,771. And this book may have 10,000 pages or may have 6,000 pages or may have only one more page. But we haven't read any of the pages before. We don't know anything. All we know is the effect. We don't know the cause. And when you search for the cause, what happens is you're trying to take God's vision of reality, which goes beyond ours, and stuff it into our little vision. That takes people into falsehood, into blame, into needless realities of guilt. You have to look at this and say, there are three things that we could see for sure. One is, I don't want to be Leiby Aaron, which means I have to be committed to moving beyond my own personal level of fragmentation. The other is, I would like to be like Mr. Gehrman and have my heart where my mind is. And the third is, I'll be big enough to see that when I'm one of the searchers, and on every level, everybody who's listening here is one of the searchers, because if you weren't a searcher, you wouldn't be listening. I'm going to validate the credibility of my search and let this be the core of my life. And we have to learn from this. And as the parents themselves said, we have to thank God, they said this, for the good that emerges. They thanked God for the 9 years they had with him and for the searchers. They were big enough to see it. Thank God for the realities of your life, because your choices are going to give you more than you could ever imagine. Have a good day.